What's happening out there, everybody? This is Hayden Adams with A Designer Who Codes, and I'm coming to you with another website critique. In all my website critiques, I think about three things when I look at a website. One, how does it look? Two, how does it function? And three, how can we improve the website? In this version, it looks pretty good to start, but there are some more fixes to be had as we run down the road. The first is I'm not quite sure why this font didn't load. I'm guessing it's not Times New Roman, as I did see, I think it was Calibri in the background when I looked at some of the code. So just make sure in this design that there's kind of a problem with the fonts not loading, and that overall kind of irks me, I guess, because I've just spent all my time in the 2000s and the 1990s with just Times. And I was like, I would run as far as I could from Times when we actually can choose fonts down the road. If I come into the overall code of things, let's go to the inspect section going on. Yeah, I think Calibri was the font they were trying to use, but unfortunately it didn't load for whatever the reason. A good H1 up here. The one thing I would watch for, and I do like the home, I kept trying to click Hudson Park Schools. I know there's a home button, and I like the fact that there is only one button back to home. The problem is I just kept wanting to click Hudson Park Schools. It just kept drawing me in to be right here. If I go into one of these pages, let's take a look at the high school, for example. In terms of usability, it's okay to look at, but it's hard to read. And that's really because all of this type is justified. I almost never recommend justified type on the web, in part because we cannot control what are called rivers. And the rivers are the spaces between the words as they all flow together. Hence, a river should flow. The reason for that is, and this gets into I will date myself as I'm talking about this, but we can't control the H and J's. And the H and J's taking you down a little memory lane is, for all designers, I've never heard of this thing called Quark Express. We used to have to use this tool, kind of predates the InDesign era, but they had a great menu called hyphenation and justification, and you can control the space and character spacing when it came to justifying type on print. We don't have this ability on the web. So online, it's hard to control the readability of type when it comes to justified type. What I would do here in this paragraph is, if I find the justified type, notice now if you pause this video and just watch it for a split second, notice how much easier it is to read this type without the justifying of the type. Also, since we're in the type section, you'll almost never see me touch the opacity. Opacity is kind of a foregone, bygone, go away, truly opacity. It's really meant for opacity. So I should set this to like 0.2 and it kind of fades. So I'm only fading things back and forth. But if it comes to type, I'll use the RGB or the RGBA for alpha, but I'll rarely use the opacity because it really affects the whole entire area of this paragraph and the TD and the TH if we had those sections. So I would just ditch the opacity and make it that pure dark color, or I would affect the school blue and make it a darker blue if that was my variable for my color going forth, which we're not even using anyways. The word spacing I almost never touch either. The reason for that is I like the way it's spaced out by default with, I know Lotto is a Google font. So to me, it's really much of, I just keep it just the way it should read in terms of the Lotto Light. Also with Lotto Light, I might notice how if I take off Lotto Light, how much heavier and just easier to read this font is. The font is so light with Lotto Light that it almost needs a bigger font to come through. I almost like the taking off Lotto Light and just using the generic Bootstrap font coming through because it's just really readable. So just watch for that, but notice how much easier this font is to read. And if we were to bring back all of these areas and we bring back the justified, and now look how much harder it is to read back and forth. Also, I'm a stickler for H's and paragraphs and all that good stuff. And to me, I like how this is the H1 up here, which is totally fine to have Hudson Park High School be the H1. And we'll get into break tags in a second and why we shouldn't have break tags sitting in here. But then the welcome becomes also the H1 when it really should be the H2 down below in this direction because we're now having a header and then a subheader down below. And then this should be in theory a paragraph or an H3, but I could go easily paragraph in this direction. And that's because if we think of headings with web accessibility, we should have really only one H1 telling us what the main title is, or we put the H1 up here and the navigation becomes the H2 with the sidebar and the footer H2, which we'll get to down the road. So there's really only one H1 per page. So if Hudson Park High School is the H1, then welcome becomes the H2 in here as well. So just watch for those kind of pieces going forward. So let's talk about break tags. Break tags should not be used to create space or break apart things. If we look at a break tag, what it should do is if I have a P tag right here, so if I type P and then I'll close the paragraph just so I don't lose it, and I were to say 125 Oak Street, in theory, what would happen is I'd have to drop a line down for a proper address. So a break tag is meant to sit inside the P tags, and then I'll say like San Francisco, California, 94110. And what will happen is as an address, that will drop down, but it won't create a space in between. What we should do then is say paragraph, and we'll say new paragraph. Now what's going to happen is there might not be a space, which there is in this case with using CodePen, is notice how the space is working in this case right here. The break tag doesn't create the space, the P tags create the space. And if I want more or less space on the P tags, I could say margin bottom and say 3 rem just to kick this thing way down the page. Didn't drop as far as I thought. Just for fun, I'm going to kick 5. There we go. I can control the space as much as I want. Now, in this case, when we come back to this design, this isn't a paragraph per se, as we have a P tag throughout this. This is an unordered list. So what I should do is I should have over here a UL, close UL, and then we should have an LI for phone number, close the LI, and additional information. And now, yes, my bullet points do show up, but what does happen is you have a list of information. So I think about when it comes to organizing my content, is it an H, is it a P, or is it a ULLI, the big 3? And in this case, we use the paragraph, but not appropriately. We're breaking these spaces, but really what they should be is a ULLI. And inside, I know the person who sent this to me did tell me this is Bootstrap, and I can tell with the calls and rows that it is. And we can simply take out the bullet points with an unordered list in here as well. Speaking of H1s and H2s again, the alumni up here should be an H2. If we look at the way the web accessibility shows, the footer can go back to an H2 because it's a brand new section. And if you had outside, or let's say a subsection, trying to find the right words here, the H3 can happen there, but even notice there's no H4 here. So you could really, let's go back to Hudson Park Schools. The footer down below can really just use an H2 in the list and not P break, P break, P break. That's not really the way we use the break tags. We would set an unordered list to appropriately make them accessible. The same with up here, I did see a break tag kind of hanging. I'm not quite sure what it's doing up here, but we can just get rid of it for the most part. If I can find this page again, I think it was, let me find my little link. Here it is. There was one other thing I also wanted to point out on this site that I do recommend improving. Big plus and big thumbs up, by the way, also too. I love the fact that there are comments inside the code. That's just, I know it's for internal purposes only, but I love doing this because I can find things much easier as I scroll up and down the pages going forward. The one thing I would watch for also is that if we look inside this area, we said P class quote, but we have the code of a block quote. So I would change the plea. Geez, I can't talk in this video today. The block quote tag and not a P class quote decorative. That's what I would just do to change that piece. And let's not use Times New Roman. Let's find another font that shows up that's a little stronger than Times. I think because I was just using Times for like 5 years back in the 90s. Yes, way back in the 90s, that I just ran as far as I could away from Times New Roman. And opacities I would eventually get rid of. I think about setting my fonts. So if you want to set a color to school blue, let's find a new variant of colors that fits that. But I would just ditch the opacity in this case right here. It's minimal, but overall you're looking good though on this part. Font style italic, text align right, looking good there. Also in this design, that little home icon. Now I see we did use the Font Awesome icons up here, and this is for anyone who is generally using Font Awesome for the I class, the FA home icon. That's great to use, but especially in the A tag, what's going to happen is the I doesn't have any information pertaining to what this button is. So I think about when I try to design things, especially when it comes to web accessibility, I think about the ARIA label for link purpose. Now what this is designed to do is that you can write inside of the code, maybe not right here as well. Oh, there we go. I can say ARIA label, and I can say return to the home screen. And what that'll do is that'll then tell the web browser for web accessibility that that home icon will send me back to the home page if I click on it. Also, if we go take a look at the mobile design, I think you achieved success here, even though I'm not super sold on a double drop down. What I do like in lieu of a drop down, because what happens is this is a drop down and then a drop down, and there's a lot of drop downs going on. What I might recommend, and this is like if we take a look at apple.com, for example, what they do with their submenus is if we were to go into the Mac page and we kick this into inspect, what happens is to get around the double menu item, this menu does open up when it comes to this. I can't close that section, so ignore that area. But notice how I can scroll side to side when it comes to the sub navigation. So it's an idea to think about. It doesn't hurt the overall design with the double drop or the double hamburger icons. That's okay, but I think about in lieu of a double drop down, what if we then had a scroll side to side for these pieces, and you could just click to then read more about the details as I need to read more in back and forth areas. So just watch that on the mobile site. It's not going to hurt anything the way you have it. I think it looks okay. I just think about in general, it's just to me usability. I have like two things I have to go to back and forth. So I almost want to go, okay, just keep these as drop downs. And then this one is a scroll side to side by keeping it at the very top. Again, it's minimal. I don't think it's going to hurt or harm anything. It's just a thing to think about overall. In full wrap up, this is an overall good design. I think we just have to improve the font and overall legibility, and we're there. If we go back to that home page again, the site structure works and the flow works. I like how these pictures are not so tall that you can't read development support. Some sites have these giant pictures and they lose the ability to read what's on the page. And this site achieves that. That's where I like how you have these three pictures where you have different pictures for primary school, for high school, and you didn't get the word welcome or any text below lost. And that's important to look at in a design. There's so many things that fall what are quote unquote below the fold where I can't read the text because the picture is just so gosh darn big. One thing I didn't notice as well, or I noticed it was not there. This is minimal, but inside your head section, I didn't see any meta description of overall what's going on. You've got the widgets, you've got different pieces, analytics, totally fine there. But the one thing I was missing was on a meta description. So make sure you put that in as it helps web browsers identify what this site is. Google will find it, but overall, I would include a meta description somewhere in here just to make the web accessibility that much accessible. But as someone wrote, this person did write to me, they're a self-taught web developer, web designer, and kudos to them. This looks like a good start. just needs fixes on the legibility and the readability going forward.